Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Welcome to the July Cosmic Forecast with me, Krista, and
Olivier.
we have a very busy July to go over, mostly with the moon. So we're going to jump right in, and I'm going to talk about the moon first since there's a lot going on there. We have on Tuesday, July 2nd, we have a solar eclipse in new moon, of course, in 10 degrees Cancer, 38 minutes at 12:16 p.m. And that is Pacific time as always. Then we have on Tuesday, July 16th, we have a lunar eclipse at 24 degrees Capricorn in 4 minutes at 2:38 p.m. However, it does go void of course immediately if you're doing magic until Wednesday. It will then go into the sign of Aquarius at 2:19 a.m. And then finally, we have our second new moon in this month. It'll be Wednesday, July 31st, 8 degrees of Leo and 37 minutes at 8:12 p.m. So let's hear your take on the moons.
Well, it doesn't happen all the time, but this month, in July, we're going to have two new moons. And I read yesterday about this. I was wondering what it means, if it does mean anything. It does. It's the second new moon is called the black moon, which is really important for weekends. They can have their procession and do magic, and it's very powerful. And that's why we're wearing black
We've
tonight.
got black
Yes.
Yes. And my B for the Cancer, the sun of
Yes.
Cancer.
Oh, and by the way, I was reading about the second new moon, and it says it's in Cancer, in Leo, but it's actually in Cancer again.
Oh,
There's a little twist to it.
Oh,
It is in Leo,
there's-
but there's something that's conjunct to a planet. I didn't really get my notes about this, but so it's in Cancer again. So it's the whole month is in Cancer. So it's really important for emotions and love, mostly emotions and love, I would say, and family stuff and connection and friendship.
Yes, we're going to talk a lot
Yeah.
about, again, the sign of Cancer and Leo, because it is a month for
Yes.
Leo because it's a mother planet. So the thing I learned recently is that all these years people go on about eclipses and how important they are. And so I just asked an astrologer straight out. I said, what is it to you? What is a lunar eclipse? What is a solar eclipse? And she said, simply put, and by the way, this was Jeanette Lewis, who was working at Mystic Journey Bookstore, and she's a very lovely lady and does astrology is one of the things she does. She said basically the new moon solar eclipse starts a 6-month cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would look and see what sign it's in and where it hits your chart, and you could say, oh, over the next 6 months, I can focus on, doing new things in that area. And then the opposite, the lunar eclipse is the culmination. So you go back in time and see what started 6 months ago. And again, things aren't always so nice and tidy, but it's nice because you can start working with them a little more deeply. Like you were talking about how last time we were talking about the moon being the heartbeat of the
Yes.
year. This is another way to go deeper. And this is where the deeper you go with astrology, you're going to get more results and not just get, into the hype that every eclipse is important. Well, why is it important? How is it important to you?
Yes.
And that's what I think is important. And don't just listen to what even these vague descriptions are. You go and look and say, well, why is it important to me? What does this mean to me when it's in the sign of Cancer or Capricorn? And it may not mean as much to some people.
Yeah, exactly. And you just gave me an idea, actually. I didn't think about this before, but if it's the moon is the heartbeat of the year, an eclipse could be a heart attack. And eclipse in a solar eclipse could be a heart attack, and a lunar eclipse could be the time when you're out. So I would think that an eclipse could be the time when, if it's a new moon solar eclipse, it could be telling you that you had new projects. What happened to those? Are you going to really take care of those? Are you really going to start new things, or you're not? And if you're not, you have until you have 6 months to think about this and create new things for yourself.
maybe heart palpitations.
Yes,
Not heart
exactly. Take some
attack.
medicine.
So think of it. I mean, basically, eclipses are more powerful moons, and one of my arguments with some of the astrology that goes out, that's kind of the popular astrology, is every month it's all hyped up. Like this is going to change your consciousness. Your consciousness does not get changed by a moon. It get changed by you if you're lucky.
Yes, exactly.
But they can really enhance. I mean, I love the idea of the planets being conscious beings that we have relationships with, and the more we understand it, maybe we don't do certain things unconsciously, and so that's where maybe people are reacting to certain things unconsciously, but it's still you. The planet's not doing it to you. And especially the moon, I think, because it comes and goes so quickly.
Yeah.
It's not, there are some moments in time that don't happen very much astrologically, so they might be more profound for everyone, like your first Saturn return, because it takes so long to get there.
Yeah.
So then...
And can I mention something?
Oh, yeah, sure.
A little bit of astronomy. The solar eclipse is when the moon passes between the sun and the earth. Mm-hmm. And for the lunar eclipse, it's when it's hiding the sun. So you have the shadow of the moon on the sun. Yes.
So just a little bit about the U.S. chart. It does affect the U.S. a little bit because we have the sun in Cancer. There's a lot of Cancerian planets. So it'd be interesting to see what actually happens. I would pay attention to the news cycle on July 2nd and see what's kind of happening. It's the 7th house, and so the 7th house can be relationships with other people. So maybe relationships with other countries. It might be interesting to see what's happening there. And then the other thing I happened to notice just briefly a minute ago was that we're going to get to this a little later. I'm jumping ahead to Mercury retrograde. So there is something kind of interesting going on the last day of the month for the chart in the U.S. with Mercury retrograde. So basically, if you're, like me, if you're the sign of Cancer, that new moon might be particularly powerful because you might want to work on something since you're already a Cancer and you can feel it. And of course, anybody can do any kind of magic with new moons, but if it's Cancerian, you might want to emphasize things like the Cancerian values, family, relationship. Now, for Cancers, family can also be big picture family. It extends, especially as a Cancer evolves. I think you see everyone as your family. The Earth is your family, so it might be good even for environmental things and the planet. Yeah. And then the Capricorn is certainly very grounded and connected to often hard work and
farmer stuff.
Yeah, and it's a stable energy, so it's a very stable energy as well. And Capricorn, interesting in this esoteric astrology, Capricorn is often associated with very high initiative stuff, the initiate, and Saturn too.
Establishment.
So Capricorn gets a little bit of a bad rap when it really doesn't deserve it as a sign. People often will say, oh, that person's a Capricorn and they're all like greedy and they're this and that. I'm like, well, that's just not true because I've married a Capricorn and I've known other Capricorns. It depends on what consciousness you are, but it's different. It's looked at differently in esoteric astrology.
Yeah, and
Capricorn.
they're very generous but reserved.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
Well, the interesting thing, according to something I remember reading about, I don't know if it was Steve Forrest, but as they age, a lot of times, first of all, Capricorns can age very well, and they have their humor comes out more, and they can be more childlike and more light-hearted as they get older. And there are many, great comedians that are Capricorns, and of course there are many great people that have accomplished things. I think Joan of Arc was a Capricorn. Yeah. So there are definitely some prejudices with different signs in different ways, and Cancers aren't only about feelings and the home and family.
It didn't end well for her.
Sorry?
It didn't end well for her.
No, it did not. But I don't know. It seems like she had a job to do, and she did it.
She did. Well, yeah, that was her mission.
She was a person with a mission for sure.
Oh yeah.
So so think about, that might be good for you to work with the new moon. And then of course, full moon is known, you can do anything you want on a full moon, even though it's a culmination, but that's one of the things in magic, they say that the full moon's good for everything in a sense. You can do things before and after the full moon as well if you're practicing magic. So, but it's still a very, Cancerian period because also Mercury will be going into retrograde. It's going retrograde, and let's see, it's going July 7th officially, Sunday, and 4 degrees, 27 minutes initially in Leo, but it backs up into Cancer. And it is going to stop and station direct at 23 degrees of Cancer, 57 minutes on July 31st, which is that new moon, black moon day. And it's doing that at 8:58. And that is basically going to sit right on top of the Mercury and Cancer in the United States chart,
Yes.
which is opposed to Pluto. So that is going to be an intense day. I do predict that. I don't know if it's going to have to do with I'm wondering if more can come out about Donald Trump's taxes, because the 8th house can be connected to taxes, and
Money.
Mercury is in the 8th house.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the 2nd house is money, but also values. And what I wanted to talk about with Mercury retrograde, in the last show, I did mention I'm reading this book by Aaron Sullivan. It's a great book on retrograde planets. Well, what's interesting I didn't know this until I read the book. When planets go retrograde, they'll do it in the same signs every 6 years.
Yeah.
So basically, there's the triad of the water signs. So even though it's in Leo for a little bit, mostly this year, Mercury's going to be in water signs. So what you can do is go back 6 years at a time to look at issues connected to that particular Mercury in retrograde. And with each of the elements, she suggests a question. So for the Mercury retrograde in the water trigon, she says, ask, what is the quality of my life? And so you would look and talk about and think about, and especially if you know where Mercury is going to hit your chart, like maybe you can look at that specific house. And that way you can start to really go deeper into psychological themes, especially with the water signs.
Yeah.
So this is a good time for self-analysis, introspection, looking at where you react. So for instance, she said that if Mercury is retrograde in a certain house, you would react in that house, and you'd want to look at your reaction. Say if it's going into your 10th house, you'd look and see how you're reacting to your career.
Yeah.
You can say, what is the quality of my career and my life? This is where you really start to make some progress with astrology. When you get into the particulars, it's so amazing. We were talking about synchronicity. And what I did was I looked back 6 years ago, since I also have Mercury and Cancer in my chart on top of it all. And I had just started this practice with mantras with Tara. And I was doing a lot. I had this goal a lot. I'm not going to say how much, but it was a lot. And I thought I could do it in 2 years. I literally just finished it. And I started when Mercury was in Cancer, and I ended 6 years later. And I didn't plan that. In fact, I thought I was way off course.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. It was aligned. I said, oh my God, that's so precise. Like, I didn't make that happen. So when you start doing that, you will see these themes in your life. And that way you'll start to understand, because Mercury itself is often connected to your thought process and how you work with your thought process. So you could be bringing out more, I think, of the subconscious mind during this Mercury in Cancer. Now, since I have Mercury in Cancer, I can tell you your feelings definitely affect your thoughts a lot. So you cannot ignore your feelings. You can't, and if they align with your thoughts, you can make magic in a sense. So one of the things I find, you have to sort out your feelings if you have Mercury in Cancer. They really affect how you think and the patterns that you think.
And if it's Mercury is acting on your emotion, it's not a time to get hysterical about anything. It's time to slow down and relax and think things through without being too emotional about those. You just think, analyze, and relax and meditate, and you have to understand what's going on, because otherwise you're going to go crazy. It's not a time for going crazy.
No, and and knowing how reactive this country is, and we're getting more into the debates, and all that. The whole internet flurry is going to start up again online with the politics, and so this is a good time to practice how not to react, so that as things build up into the time of the elections, we don't react like we did in the last
emotionally.
Exactly. We say, well, wait a minute, where is this coming from? And really sit and say, well, how do I feel about this? And so it's a good way to like, I agree with you, just sort of relax and don't react. And
what do you need? What do I need?
What do I need?
Yes.
Mercury retrograde can be a perfectly fine time. It's one of the things that I don't know why people go nuts. It goes retrograde 3 times a year. It's not a new thing.
Yeah.
Yes, sometimes it triggers something because it hits something in your chart that's prominent, and that's why you want to know where is it going in my chart. It's not going to affect you all the time, even personally.
I read something yesterday about astronomy and Mercury, and Mercury is made of scientists think that Mercury is made of iron, and it acts like a magnet, and it's the closest planet to the sun. So when it goes retrograde, it's like we are made of energy, so it's acting on our brains, and that's why we go crazy and we forget things, and the electronics are going crazy because it's acting on those things. So when those things are happening, like I was just saying, we should not go crazy or get hysterical because it's going to go worse, get worse. So just, it's not like ignoring it. It's just, I know this, I deal with it, and know what I need to do about it. That's how it should work.
I'm glad you brought up about the real planet Mercury, because I watched a documentary on sort of I don't know if the birth of Mercury, or basically it was about the planet, and what a tough little planet it is. It's been beat up and pulverized, and it's really gone through so much. And I say, please guys, don't beat it up anymore. It's really survived a lot. It's a tough little planet, and it does not deserve you blaming, all of your problems on Mercury retrograde. So please don't do that. People are getting a little better than they used to be. Used to be everyone would be, oh, it's Mercury retrograde.
Yeah, and it's in fashion now. Everybody's talking about it because it's in fashion. So it's like 11/11 now. It's 11/11 and Mercury retrograde. So now everybody's talking about it. And what do they do with it? It's their problem, I think. They should not be affected by it.
Another suggestion that Aaron Sullivan has when Mercury is in retrograde is it's a really creative period, and particularly with things like painting and poetry, also dream analysis. And I have to admit, I do feel even more creative. Like the things I haven't done for a while, I've wanted to do. All of a sudden, I wanted to play the piano again, and I was like, oh yeah, because I can kind of feel that Mercury and Cancer kind of coming in, and so it's a really good time for creativity and also journal writing. Evidently, is a suggestion that she made, and I think that's very true.
And I read something like I think I agree with it. It's like when you have those 3 weeks of Mercury retrograde, which is start before and after, and it's a longer period anyways. You should do everything that starts with a like regroup, rethink, remodel, relocate, everything instead of starting new things. That's not the time to start new things. It's the time to rethink and make it better, whatever you have now. I think that's a way of dealing with it.
Well, it certainly is. It certainly is. Let's see what else is going on. We have Venus will be entering the sign of Cancer too on July 3rd at 8:18 a.m., but it's not staying more than a little less than a month. It goes into Leo on July 27th at 6:54 p.m. And then we have Mars leaving the sign of Cancer, and on July 1st, it enters Leo at 4:20 p.m.
Big fire going on there.
Yeah, and you were going to say that you had something to say about the fiery aspect of Mars.
Yeah, because Mars is fire and Leo is a fire sign. So when those two get together, it's going to be like a explosion. So be careful what you're doing and what you want, because it's going to be done in a fashion that's electrifying.
I think it might be a little refreshing for people that have been living with Mars and Cancer for a while, because I think that it can be kind of comfy, Mars and Cancer, and maybe a little sluggish.
Yeah, and contradictory a little bit.
Yeah, because Mars is like, and Cancer's like, no. Let's just
must
hang
have been
at
like
home.
a little bit of a few fights in families, and I would say.
Yeah. Leo is such an interesting sign. On the one hand, Leo, because it's going to be, the sun will eventually move into Leo, of course, towards the end of of July. And Leo has got this bright, enthusiastic, warm-hearted energy. It's
loyal.
It's royal, and then and also the lion has a lot of contradictory symbolism to it. So it's the Lion of Christ, but then it also represents pride. So you have all of that, and of course the Leo go wrong. It can be about trying to get attention and too much ego, and nobody really wants to be around that. All the signs have a positive, negative, by the way. So, I think, however, we need some of that fire because of all the Cancerian energy. It's going to be kind of nice to have Mars in Leo. And maybe it's a good time to think about taking initiative in the areas and taking action in areas that are Leo-like. Yeah. So let's say, what if I am a creator, and what if I'm a performer of some kind, or a salesperson? This might be a good time, to really, jump in there and do some things I'm really passionate about.
We might have a few interesting movies coming out at this time. Yeah.
Oh, that would make sense.
Yeah, like very powerful action oriented, I would say. I don't know about what's coming, but I would think so.
That might be true, and it's the summertime, so they have those blockbuster type movies, so that would be quite appropriate. Now we also have Chiron, which has been in Aries for a little while, but it's still early Aries, will be going retrograde July 12th, and it's in 5 degrees of Aries. So we definitely have a little more retrograde planets in July, because we already have 4 other planets in retrograde: Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto. And just a sort of point about when the larger planets are in retrograde, it's a slower process than when... because Mercury's fast. So, each month is not going to be the same. It depends on the aspects going on between the planets and also in your chart. So don't worry, because some of these planets have been in retrograde for a little while. You're probably used to them, actually. Yeah. But, Chiron going retrograde, if you're in early degrees of Aries, of course, it's going to affect people with early degrees Aries right now because it's closer. The closer in transits, you want to have close orbs. Because they move, you want to do it, of course, exact is the day that's really important. And right before something moves towards your planet, that's also where you feel the effect. So you want to have a close orb within 1 or 2 degrees going in, and maybe a few more going out. So it's not going to affect all Aries. If I'm a late degrees of Aries, I'm not going to feel that Chiron until it gets up in degrees. But we were talking, I think you weren't on the show, we talked about, what is your thoughts about Chiron and Aries? We talked about it earlier in a different show.
I just wanted to say something. I had an image of all those retrograde planets going on, and I was thinking about a cartoon scene with the solar system, and the planets going the normal way, and suddenly the other ones are going retrograde. I said, no, we're running away. We don't want to go with you. We had enough. So no, but it's just a little bit. It's not going to last too long.
Yeah, no,
but it was really funny.
No, it's
like the same with Mercury. It's like I don't go with you guys. I have my own life, so now I'm taking charge of it, and I'm retrograde now. Go wherever you want. It's like a nice image, I think.
Well, it's true. It is true that they act in ways that they don't normally act.
Yeah, exactly.
And unexpectedly.
Yeah.
So I've said this before on the show, but I'll say it again. That, for instance, during a Mercury retrograde, twice now I found lost objects. And I looked it up, and evidently that's something that can happen during. Yes. So this might be good for treasure hunting. Yes. I thought if I was a treasure hunter, those are the times I'm going to go looking for treasure. During
going
Mercury.
to the past and finding something.
Yeah,
it's
true. And I didn't, like I said, it was just by chance. And then after a while, I said, I'm going to see what's going on.
So I'm not familiar with a Chiron. What does it represent exactly?
Oh, so Chiron is, one of the sort of the popular views of Chiron. It's where you're wounded in your chart.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
The
centaur. Wounded warrior. No, is it?
The wounded warrior. But it's not, that's a very one-dimensional view of Chiron in a mythology. Chiron was a centaur. He did have a very difficult childhood, which he overcame. He was a very intelligent centaur, very wise. He trained heroes. He was a teacher. And then, of course, he gets that wound by accident from Hercules. But even then, he manages to get out of the pain of that with basically taking the place of Prometheus. They switch places. And so it's a complex mythology. So Chiron is not only where you're wounded, but it's also the place in your chart that can teach you. And that will and maybe even teach you about your wound. But also just think of Chiron as also the teacher. And so whatever lessons are in that area, that house, you can have Chiron help you. And I've been through my Chiron return. It happens at the age of 50. And it was really not a heavy energy for me, though I did have to, sort of pay attention to some things kind of came up, but it wasn't like Saturn. And maybe it has to do with also where your Chiron is. Yeah. So I think sometimes there's like too much emphasis on it being wounded, because Chiron really he never acted a victim in his life. Mm-hmm. He overcame everything. He overcame the fact that his mother rejected him and his father rejected him, and then Apollo trained him. And so to me, Chiron's this idea of overcoming our wounds, and he can help us to do that. And I think he's also connected to some kind of healing, like with herbs and things like that as well. So, and astrology. Oh my God, how can I forget that? He is connected to astrology. So that's and being in Aries, Aries is the pioneer, and inventions can happen, and in new ways.
Yeah.
It's the fighter, So, and Chiron and Aries might be very good for innovation in areas connected to healing and also military, unfortunately.
And I was about to say this. If it's in a fire sign, it's going to be about healing yourself with like drastic ways, like more than usual, like stronger ways. Instead of being softer, it's more like harsh, but not harsh in a negative way. More like harsh in a way that it's more intrusive. It's more like you're going to heal yourself by like really deciding for things you want to heal and go for those and heal them in a way that you don't usually do. I think that's what it should be with this fire sign.
That's interesting. Yeah, doing it in innovative ways.
Yes.
And I do believe, am I right? Yes.
Intrusive, I said, like more like, as in opposition of soft, not soft healing, but more like harder.
Yeah, harder.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a cardinal
maybe
sign.
Maybe surgeries or things if you need to. I think that might be the way to heal if you need to.
And there can also be innovation.
Exactly.
In the healing,
New
and
things,
also, like I said, in military and fighting, and also Aries being so much about me and expressing myself. And by the way,
and action and moving.
And
so
action.
There's a lot of moving things and acting like maybe hiking a lot, running, things like this.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And the United States has Chiron and Aries, but it's in later degrees. It's going to go through a Chiron return, but it's at 20 degrees, so we still have a little ways to go. It's in Aries for quite some time. Chiron is in the signs in different amounts of time, and in Aries it's in there for a little while. I forget how many years, so it's going to take a while. And remember also retrograde, you're kind of going back over some of the same ground, so you can look and see if Chiron is affecting you. You're going to go back over some of the same themes that you just went through, which I always forget about the retrograde. It gives you a chance to go back and say, okay, I'm going over the ground again to see what's
It can be
what's
about
going on.
relapsing as well.
Yes, it could be a relapsing. That would be, I guess, an unconscious way of handling it.
Yeah.
So that, and then Ceres, which I think is a fairly important asteroid, is Thursday, July 28th, is going direct. It's been retrograde, and it's in early degrees of Sagittarius. So it may, I'm not quite sure, but it may catch up with Jupiter then, since that's in Sagittarius. And Ceres, of course, is connected to the mother. And harvest and values connected to the mother, and Sagittarius being about freedom and philosophy and travel, and so that might be good for the women's movement. Yeah,
I've read about this yesterday. I think that's really important for the women this coming month.
Yeah, and because Sagittarius it's got a fighting energy, and then considering what's going on,
that's what's happening with the charts from the US, because they might get a voice that's going to be heard this time, and it's not going to be nice.
Yes, because the U.S. has, I was going to look at the degrees, at 12 degrees of Sagittarius is its ascendant. And so Ceres is going to be, going somewhere through the first house, which is, its identity. Yeah. So this is a great time to, fight for...
Yeah, their rights and what they accomplished until now, and they're trying to take back away from them,
And also to pass the ERA. I mean, wouldn't that be great? I think it's got a good chance with some of the other things happening too in the chart with the sort of the asteroids, and I went over in other episodes. So that's basically what's going on. I think we've covered the gist of July and
2019.
Don't panic and don't believe everyone that says this moon is going to change your consciousness forever, and good luck with that. And that's just not going to happen. And I that overhype is a disservice to astrology, because astrology is profound and precise if you do know what you're doing, or you take the time. Like, I'm not a professional astrologer. I just take the time to do a little depth research on my chart and say, wow, that's kind of crazy that it's doing that. And yes, I've read some books, but you can learn a lot yourself by just taking the time, looking at the chart, saying, what do I feel about these? There's so much out there. But I think there's this unrealistic expectation every time there's an eclipse. And I think that it can hurt people, because they might be expecting this great shift. And then when it doesn't happen, they feel really let down, and they might even, be depressed by it. Yeah. And I don't think that's what this is for. This is to help you get more insight. And I'm not going to say there's never any momentous things that happen, because there are, but not every month.
We are affected by like the moon and everything. But you just gave me an idea. I just wanted to say nobody does anything to any planet. You do no, I mean, no planets do anything to you. You do things to the planet.
Yeah, that idea that exactly they're not really
They
making
don't
you
affect
do
you.
things.
You do things to the planet. Look,
Right.
what are we doing to the planet here?
Yeah. Well, maybe it's a co-relationship.
Yeah, of
I
course
think
it
I
is.
think they're conscious
We're part of
energies.
it. We're
I
part
think
of
they're
the planet.
energies.
Yeah, we are.
We're part of
Yeah.
it. And we're part of the cosmos. So I think that's all I have to say for this month, and definitely just enjoy the eclipses and the moon. Sometimes it's just fun to go out and
Yeah.
look at them with binoculars.
But the one on the second is going to be at 3 a.m. or something, so it's going to be during the night. We won't be able to see it.
Yeah, no,
But
and
the other one, I don't remember what time it was. The 31st, but
the new moon.
yeah.
That the last, it's on the
The
31st.
At what time, the lunar?
The 31st is going to be at 8:58 p.m.
Oh, we might be able to see it.
Oh no, 8:12. But still 8:12 p.m.
Yeah, we'll see it.
Yes.
It's going to be on.
So thank you again for listening to our cosmic forecast for July, and we hope you have a beautiful July. And remember, you are part of the cosmos.
Yes, a nice beginning of the summer.